Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining in on this fourth module. It's actually the last module that we are hosting on the CNFO Leadership Institute for those of you in the Virgin Islands. I will start sharing my screen and we will have our facilitator, Mr. Mitchell Lee, conducting tonight's session.
Good night, everyone. Thank you guys for joining this final session of this 4-module series on for the Virgin Islands. So tonight we're going to look about a bit about leadership. We want to share some thoughts on what is leadership, why is leadership important in Fisherfolk organization, and who leads Fisherfolk organization. And then, of course, we want to explore a few leadership styles in terms of how leadership is carried out. And we'll just share a couple of these. And then I want to also just share a bit on what the CNFO is doing in terms of building leaders, facilitating the next generation of leaders. So those are the things we're going to look at tonight. And well, this is part of the process as well as we share with the Virgin Islands Fisherfolk. So what is leadership? I want to say to you that when we talk about leadership, we talk about being in charge or organizing, directing, setting some sort of process in motion. I like to look at it and say, well, when you're leading, you're taking somebody or something all the way to a place, to some destination. So you're moving from a particular position to somewhere else, a different place. And then a leader is one who actually does that. So a leader is a person who takes a group or an organization someplace. But a leader doesn't have to be singular. So leaders can work together to take a group or an organization someplace. Yes? And then the leadership part is just what you do. As a person or a group of persons to take your organization or your group someplace different to where they are now. Yes? So that is what leadership is about. It's about leading. It's about taking. It's about changing where you are into some other place or moving from where you are to some other desired destination. We have a couple of quotes from Maxwell. The first one is very simple. It said, leadership is influence. Influence, nothing more, nothing less. I like to define leadership in a couple of ways, and I just share two of them with you. Leadership is a process of social influence in which a person can enlist the aid and support of others in the accomplishment of a common task. Or leadership is a process of social influence by a person or a group of persons to enlist the support of others to achieve a shared goal or objective. And I quite like this second definition, a process of social influence by a person or a group of persons to enlist the support of others to achieve a shared goal or objective. And one of the key things I really want us to understand here about leadership is that leadership has as its foundation something, some goal, some purpose, some objective, something moving you from where you are to some other desired place or position. So that is critical. So leadership is about process of influence by a person or a group of persons. Maxwell also says that leaders must be close enough to relate to others, but far enough ahead to motivate them. So I want to look at some key aspects of leadership. This is the what about leadership. So leaders must be close enough to relate to others. And what this really is saying to me is that leadership is about being a part of the need to move from where you are to another position. So you must be able to relate to the organization, to the group, to the other people or persons or entities in the group. But you must also be visionary. So leaders must also know that, hey, we want to go to this place and we are determined to go there by impacting processes, etc., creating activities to allow us to get there. So this is critical. So what are some of the aspects that we speak about when we think about leaders being close enough, but also far enough to motivate? So leaders must be able to inspire people. And inspiration is about grabbing what somebody else, grabbing the innermost desires that you have and having some emotional reaction to it. And it could be based on logical reasoning, but it boils down to some emotional involvement that says, hey, I want to be involved. I want to. And when you inspire people, that's internal, then the motivation to participate in getting somewhere else is also there. Now, one of the key issues of influencing people is embodied in the fact that people psych leaders. So your psyche is critically important. If you're a leader who is critically aware of where you're going, you're fully convinced that you can get there, and you're fully convinced about the path to get there, people will grab that enthusiasm, will grab that motivation because they also can identify with it. So this is important. Leaders themselves need to always be motivated, be inspired in order to inspire the group and the others that are part of the process of moving from one position to another. And then leaders must participate. They must be active, and not active in a sense of domineering, but active in a sense of collaborating. So leaders, yes, must take a helicopter view of visionary forward thinking, but they must also be practical and here and now. Participate, be active, and collaborate. And in this particular context, leaders must appreciate their weaknesses and their strengths and participate in a manner that is consistent with where they fit in the scheme of things. So not because you're a leader means that you are the best to do a particular thing, but you may be the best to support in some instances somebody else who has greater skills and knowledge in a particular activity. But the key issue is you must participate and you must collaborate. And then, of course, leaders must always understand the aspect of where we're going, what we want to achieve. We must always keep in mind what are the objectives of this group, why we want to move from where we are, how we're going to get there, and what are the key things that will identify us being there. So you must always have in mind goals and objectives of the group. Now, I know that for the VI at the moment that we have some issues in terms of clearly articulating goals, objectives, etc. But certainly we as leaders have a role to play in that, in terms of being close enough to relate to what is happening in the Virgin Islands, but be visionary enough to be able to articulate goals and objectives to move us from where we are now to where we would like to be. And I think these are really key aspects of, you know, what is leadership? What is leadership about? Yeah. And then we want to move to why is leadership important, particularly in small-scale fisherfolk organizations or in the small-scale fisherfolk subsector. Why is leadership important? Well, we in the CNFO believe that small-scale fishers are important and they need to have a sense of security. They need to be able to be confident that their livelihoods are not threatened. Yes. So not only are they important and need to be secure, but fisherfolk are important to the societies in which they exist. Not only are they culturally important in terms of way of life, but they're also important in terms of food security or food sovereignty. And we know we have time issues with these modules, but we could expand a lot on some of these, particularly societal importance of fisherfolk, relating to why it's important for them to have good leadership to secure their livelihoods. So societal importance embraces quite a lot of different concepts, not just food provision, not just society, economic activity in terms of livelihoods, but also embraces the concept of health. So food can be provided, but the value of the food is also a critical element to examine, and particularly in the context of fisheries, the food that fisherfolk provide has significant health benefits that actually can contribute to human well-being in terms of physical well-being. And this is borne out in quite a lot of different studies. And I mean, we could share with you, I mean, different documents that relate to this. And I would mention one just so that you have an idea. Several years ago, the CNFO and the CRFM asked the Caribbean Public Health Agency to give us an idea of what the importance of seafood is to human health. And one of the phrases that I remember quite distinctly in the very first draft of the document, it was the role of seafood in food and nutrition. One of the very first clear things that struck me in the first draft, it didn't stay until the end. I mean, and there are a lot of political reasons for that. They made this statement in the document. They said seafood is a powerhouse food. And they went on to say that adequate intake of marine capture seafood can result in a reduction in the public health bill, which is one of the largest public expenditure in most of the Caribbean islands, health. Yes. So, well, the document still maintains that part, but the statement about the idea of seafood being a powerhouse food struck me because it spoke to the issue that the food that we provide as fisherfolk, I'm talking about our importance, the food that we provide can address many public health issues that are major, can address hypertension, it can address malnutrition, it can address obesity. So it's critical that we understand that we are important and therefore we need to be protected, our way of life, our livelihoods, etc. So we need leadership to deal with that. But also the idea that the skills and the knowledge and the experiences that small-scale fisherfolk have in terms of conducting their business from day to day also are important in terms of securing ecosystems, the foundations, the physical foundations and interactions that we depend on to get the food from. So the whole idea of ecosystem health can benefit from the contribution of small-scale fishers, our knowledge, our skills, and our experiences. And I think this is very easy to relate to. I mean, a fisher spends, particularly in his most productive season, perhaps 15 to 20 days per month at sea on the ocean, observing what is happening, being directly in touch and seeing a lot of things that a researcher will not see who spends maybe 6 months. And you spend 15 to 20 days each month. So, I mean, the importance of your knowledge, skills, and experiences to add to the mix of information that would guide sound ecological management and responsible management of resources is invaluable. How do we get that? There must be some form of leadership to both harness, transfer, and represent, etc. But the importance is obviously tempered by the fact that there are many threats to small-scale fisheries as well. So we need leadership not only to secure the importance and to secure societal benefits and to secure livelihoods, but we also need leadership in fisherfolk organizations and in fisheries where small-scale fisherfolk operate, because fishers face threats to their livelihoods from competing interests. And I'm sure in the Virgin Islands we have scenarios where there are threats to fisherfolk livelihoods from different areas. Tourism is one area where you have some coastal development, you have some use of the marine space that competes with fisherfolk livelihoods. It happens in Antigua, and I'm sure it happens in the Virgin Islands in some ways. Perhaps the yachting industry does take up some of the areas that you would have fished in the past. Things like that. There are threats that are competing for fisherfolk space, the space that we need to operate in, survive, and live. And then there's the whole idea of conservation, and there's a lot of conservation narrative floating around that negatively impacts fisherfolk. And this is definitely a significant threat in Antigua and Barbuda, in Belize, in a lot of the countries, in the Caribbean. We have conservation interests that seeks to threaten the livelihoods of fisherfolk. And maybe that's not the primary objective, but that is the end result. I mean, for instance, in Belize, they have enacted a ban on gill nets. And just like any other gear, gill nets can be sustainably and responsibly utilized in fisheries. And there are many other measures that have been put in place as well. And they're still working on measures to measures that will negatively impact fisherfolk and their livelihoods. So conservation definitely is a competing interest and an interest that threatens livelihoods, basically by the way it approaches what we call management. And then we have things like oil and gas, and may not be that critical in the Virgin Islands, but certainly in other Caribbean islands like Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. We have significant issues from the oil and gas industry. To a lesser extent in some of the other countries, but certainly where there's oil production, there's a significant threat to fisherfolk livelihoods, small-scale fisherfolk livelihoods. Particularly in terms of exploration activities. I mean, when you're seeking to find oil itself, the soundings, the actual process does chase fish away, and then the actual setting up of wells and things like that. So the oil and gas industry does pose a threat. I mean, and of course we have, in recent times, we have a lot of blue economy initiatives that are directly competing with small scale fishers, and these include, I mean, aquaculture, mariculture, cage culture, different type of activities that they want to do in the open sea. So these are critical things. So this is why leadership is important. We need to address those threats to livelihoods of fisherfolk because fisherfolk are important. So if we understand what is leadership, the importance of it, then we need to examine a bit of the whole idea of how do we look at fisherfolk in the context of everybody else. So we have competing interests, and we have importance to society, and we have livelihoods. How do we look at competing interests? So we have the whole concept of the value chain. Next slide, Nadine. We have the whole idea of the value chain. Yes. So we have people from different perspectives, and I just shared a few in terms of, you know, tourism, things like that. But we also have within the value chain, it's the fisheries value chain, other players as well, who deal with, well, when I say they conflict with fisherfolk sometimes. So for instance, we have importers of fish and fishery products. Yes. We also have persons who buy and sell, middlemen, etc. Sometimes you need to be represented in terms of, I mean, how they deal with you, with us. Yeah. In addition to those other players that we mentioned. So within the whole value chain, marketing, international issues, things like that. Yes. And then outside of those more localized areas of threat and situations where fishers are threatened and require leadership to maintain or secure interests, we also have international issues. So we know we have a lot of talk now about climate change, and we have a lot of international agreements. So these all impact small scale fisheries. And sometimes when we operate just at the national level, we only understand the concepts when they're put in place at the national level. Whereas if we are aware from leadership from the beginning or early, then we can be proactive so that those international agreements don't negatively impact our livelihoods. And when I speak of these agreements, we can look at, I mean, some of the biodiversity targets. I mean, 30% MPAs. I mean, these are things that international agreements that directly impact fisherfolk and their livelihoods. Because if you increase MPAs, you actually decrease the space that fishers have to operate in. That's just a reality. Irrespective of any narrative and any language, you prohibit a space from fishers to fish, you're reducing the space that they have to fish. Simple like that. And therefore you're threatening their livelihood. And of course, there are the whole idea of climate change, which does present a real challenge. And if we have the type of leadership that can have group representation, then we can actually be proactive in terms of mitigating climate change impacts, both potential and realized. And also we can adapt to impacts that we cannot avoid. So these are critical issues that we also need to be involved in order to secure livelihoods and to protect our way of life. So these are really some of the why issues. Why do we need to really secure Fisherfolk? Why do we need leadership to do this? I mean, these are critical things that we need to look at. There are quite a few other things that we can think about as well. For instance, not all international agreements are negative, and we could use leadership to actually not only highlight positive agreements such as the voluntary guidelines on securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of food security and poverty eradication, which is a document that seeks to secure small-scale fisheries, an international instrument. But how do we get this in the local context implemented? This is not going to be pushed by governments necessarily because it requires effort from them. But small-scale fisheries, fisherfolk being aware of these things, positive international agreements, can actively pursue their implementation at the national level. Of course, this is more effectively done by a group or by an organization of fisherfolk who are led by people who can represent on these issues, who can vision, who can take the group from where they are now in terms of implementing those measures to a different place of implementation. So these are some of the critical issues that I wanted to mention in terms of why we need leadership in Fisherfolk organization. So then I want to go to who leads Fisherfolk organizations. So we looked at what leadership is about, why we need it, and then I want to touch a little bit on who the type of entities, individuals, or group of individuals who lead Fisherfolk organizations. So we go back to the definition, and I just twist the definition a bit in terms of the definition I like about leadership. So who leads Fisherfolk organization? Is the person who leads is the person or group of persons who use their influence to enlist the support of others to achieve a shared goal or objective. And these can be plural as well. So, leading Fisherfolk organization may not be about just one goal. I mean, for instance, when we looked at the things that Fisherfolk thought would be important to allow them to, be in a group, there were at least 4 clearly identified different goals. Yes. So who leads? The people or the persons who use their influence. And I want to say in the context of the Virgin Islands that I would phrase this. In the Virgin Islands, the people who will lead Fisherfolk organizations are those persons who are willing to use their influence to enlist the support of others to achieve a shared goal or objective. So it is not just about, having goals and objectives, feeling some, having a response or having some impact to what is happening around you that is negative to your livelihood, but it's about being willing to do something about it by impacting other people to work together with you or with us to change things and to go to a different place. Yes. So what we've seen from looking at groups and looking at the literature that has done some work in terms of research and groups is that there's some groups that have varying leaders. And this reflects a lack in positive leadership. So if the leadership changes dramatically, then many times the focus of the group also changes with the change in leadership. So strong leadership, even though it changes in a group-oriented manner. In other words, according to the constitution of the group. And that sort of a group change in leadership is really not a change in leadership, it's just a change in the people who are leading. But the process of influence remains the same because it is grounded on solid goals and objectives. So, for instance, in the CNFO, we have stayed focused on what our objectives are, because even though the people at the top change, the objectives and the goals are very clear throughout. So, but poor group leadership is that where the leadership changes, but not necessarily due to the constitutional requirements for change. Yes? So one of the key elements about good leadership is that it focuses the entire group on shared goals. And this is sometimes problematic in certain organizations, Fisherfolk organizations, simply because there's not an appreciation in leadership of what leadership is supposed to do. So some people are gifted in terms of leadership, and that gifting causes those persons to run ahead in terms of what their vision is, as opposed to the group vision. And what we're saying to you is that as you think of this leadership issue in the Virgin Islands and moving towards a group that has good leadership, one of the key elements is you must be focused on shared goals, and the entire group must be focused on that. And of course, we can't get into a lot of related leadership stuff. I'll share those with you at the end. But communication is a critical issue. Negotiation, conflict, quite a few different characteristics of leadership. Focuses the entire group on shared goals. But this is a critical element of good leadership and group success, when you can focus the entire group on shared goals. So what are some of the things that are characteristics of leaders who do these things? So as I said earlier, the people who should lead Fisherfolk organizations should be people who are movers and shakers, people who excite others with a vision, people who are excited themselves, sufficiently excited to excite others. So you have bubbling inside you a desire to move from here to another place, and that desire spills out and other people catch a fire, if you know that term, from your fire. So good leaders are movers and shakers. They excite others with a vision, and that's the vision of the group. They also get members to commit to group goals, and this commitment is not just verbal or paper commitment, but this commitment to group goals is about participation. So good leaders get others to participate so that we can achieve the goals of the group. Yes? But good leaders also work with and align people. So remember earlier we said, leaders need to participate. So they need to be active. So they need to work with the people in the group, but also align people. And when we use this word align, I'm saying to you that desired leaders, yes, those who lead Fisherfolk organizations, should be always conscious that there is the threat of moving outside of your goals and objectives to do many other things. And you're always conscious that you need to keep the group focused on where we're going, not where anybody else wants to take us. And this is critically important in terms of the type of leadership we would love to see in Fisherfolk organizations. And then one other aspect of desired leaders, who are the type of people that we'd like to see leading Fisherfolk organizations, are that they should be caretakers of the group culture, the values and the goals that are important to the group as a group. You know, in the Virgin Islands, you have a different way of life, a different culture than anywhere else in the world. You're unique, and every single locale is unique. And that uniqueness should come out in what you value, because it is part of you. And it spills out into your organization as well. So the CNFO is a unique organization. The Virgin Gorda Fishermen's Association is a unique organization. It has its own group culture, its own group value, and its own group goals. And the leadership of the CNFO must be a caretaker of the CNFO's culture, the values of the CNFO, and the goals of the CNFO. And similarly, if and when the Virgin Islands decide to form a group, an organization, leadership must pay attention to that. And this is critically important. So this is what we're talking about. What type of people we should see leading the groups. Yes. And then how is leadership carried out? So sorry about that. How is leadership carried out? I want to suggest to you that I'm just going to bring three types of leadership styles to you tonight. So I want to suggest to you that there are many different types of leadership styles, but I'm only going to look at three main leadership styles that are fairly common and we can identify with, and I'll just discuss them a little bit and highlight some of the key elements of leadership in this age. So how is leadership carried out? Leadership can be carried out in an autocratic or an authoritarian manner. So autocratic authoritarian leadership is about the leader telling the groups what to do and how to do it without discussing it with anybody. Rule the rules, run things. I mean, everybody just do as I say. I mean, so that is authoritarian, autocratic type of leadership. Now, in Fisherfolk organization, this type of leadership does not last. Well, it can last long, but it does not bring group success. Simply because the culture of Fisherfolk is a fairly independent and a strong culture. And the minute you start to be autocratic and authoritarian, people lose interest in going where you're going, because they clearly identify that you're not taking them anywhere that they want to be. Or your manner of moving is not consistent with their values. Because we have the whole issue of human dignity and things like that. And with the independent nature of Fisherfolk, the authoritarian, autocratic type of leadership style definitely has a lot of resistance immediately. The minute people sense that you are that type of a leader, you have less cooperation, less participation in the context of Fisherfolk organization. I'm saying this from experience in working with Fisherfolk organization. And then you have a participatory or democratic type of leadership style. And the leader here includes the members in deciding what to do and how to do it. So the participatory democratic style of leadership is where before you even embark on an activity or process, the entire group is involved, or most of the group. Those of the group who would like to be involved have an opportunity to be involved. So leadership promotes and facilitates the participation of the group in the decision-making process, in the planning process. And this type of leadership also has the benefit of people identifying directly in terms of where we're going and why. And they're more willing to participate in a participatory democratic style of leadership situation. And then the other type of leadership, that I wanted to look at was the delegative or free rein type of leadership, where the leader allows the members to make the decisions while providing overall guidance. And sometimes this is a bit problematic in terms of the group can start to go different ways and pull in many different directions based on fractions rather than having a clear focus that is governed by a democratic or a process where everybody has a say, but our decision is really guided by the goals that are, clearly put out by the leadership, the goals and objectives. So they always focused on those. So delegated free rein can lead to straying significantly from the overall objectives and goals of the organization. That is why earlier we said leaders must guard the culture, the goals and objectives of the organization and keep us in track. So these are three main types of leadership styles that we are fairly familiar with and are present in organizations to different extent. The other types of leadership styles, there's the whole idea of some leadership styles can actually hurt the organization. Yes, toxic leadership, where the leader just looks out for him or herself, or the leaders look out only for themselves without actually paying attention to the group and its goals, etc. And that type of leadership usually ends in the group, being just the leaders as opposed to a group that is going somewhere together. Yes. We want to encourage you to think of these leadership styles as you look at, forming your organization, and choose the style that is probably most fitting to the culture of the Virgin Islands. But whatever style it is, we want to submit to you some elements of what should be involved in your leadership activities. Yes. So we find in Fisherfolk organizations that it is important to have the group involved, and not only involved, but empowered. So you share power with the group and you collaborate. So not dictate, but collaborate. And this is critically important, as I mentioned, particularly in the context of the culture of small-scale fishers, a fiercely independent and a culture which speaks to human dignity, and anything that approach or seeks to, rub that the wrong way is discarded. And that is why a lot of fisherfolk organizations are not attractive to fisherfolk, because it rubs them the wrong way. I mean, you can't come with a dictatorial, authoritarian stuff where we have no say. So the whole idea of sharing power with the group, the whole idea of collaboration as opposed to dictatorial. And then the idea of leadership always expressing the organization's values, its goals, and its objectives. And this is a sort of affirmation activity that brings people always back to the consciousness of why we exist. What is our purpose, and how are we going to deal with that purpose? How are we going to satisfy that purpose? But leadership of today also critically should pull from the group the strengths and the talents of the group. So in each organization or group, there are individuals with different talents. And leadership of today must understand this, and not only understand this, but leadership of today must I use the word take advantage, the words take advantage of this to satisfy group purpose. But really it's a way of affirming people's worth in the group process. And when people think that they are of value, then they give value. So when you are of value and considered that way by the group, then you give that value to the group because it's an affirmation of your worth. Yes? So you must pull together the strengths and the talents of the team or the people in the group. Yes? But leaders must also care about people. Leaders must care about people. And unfortunately, in this age, sometimes leaders only care about money, only about satisfying their own interests. But certainly, the desired leaders must care about people and have a positive attitude. They must also be open about their own weaknesses and be willing to admit mistakes, because there's no infallible leader in the human context, of course. So they must be also open about their own weaknesses and be willing to admit the mistakes when they make them. Yes. So that is a bit about how, and then I want to close shortly. So we looked at what, yeah, we looked at why, yes, and we looked at how, yes, and we looked at who. Now I just want to touch a little bit on when, because there are situations that the Virgin Islands face now or will face that requires leadership, and there is ongoing requirement for leadership, and then there are specific periods or opportunities or situations that require leadership. Yes. And at this time you may be in the one of these different situations. So we look at several different types of situations that speak to when leadership is critical and leadership is needed. So the first point I want to make is that leadership is something that is continuously needed because there are many different factors that we are exposed to as fisherfolk. But there are certain periods where leadership needs to be dominant and not just on automatic. So there are periods when fisherfolk require representation because their rights or privileges are being abridged. And therefore, there needs to be some representative process that not only addresses the issue, but brings about a result that is amicable to fisherfolk and their interests. So there is that situation where the fisherfolk leadership is required when they need to be represented to defend their interests or to bring new interests to the table or to bring something new to the table into the mix. And then fisherfolk leadership is also required when there's a need to advocate for change. So perhaps there's some regulations in the laws of the Virgin Islands that fisherfolk think may be onerous. Or there may be the need for additional regulations that fisherfolk think are necessary for responsible resource use. So in that case, there may be need for leadership to engage in some advocacy to impact the persons who make the decisions or to impact people who impact the persons who make the decisions so that change can come about. So leadership is required when there is a need for change and some advocacy to address or to directly impact the persons who can make that change. And then leadership is also required to develop the next generation of leaders. So if we don't focus on the next generation, then who will train them to lead Fisherfolk? So leadership in Fisherfolk organization is required for that. But I want to say that in addition to the ideas of monitoring, motivating, managing the achievement of your goals and objectives, leadership is also required to vision, to always look ahead to the next set of possible achievements, or to look ahead to the next set of obstacles that need to be addressed, or to not only vision but to communicate what you're seeing. So we are seeing a direct involvement of NGOs driven by big business that seek to clearly threaten fisherfolk interests. Leadership need to vision that, to see that. So we operate at a global level, and we've seen where the World Bank has hired fisheries economists to say to fisherfolk that you need to have a situation where you give fisherfolk the right so they can sell stuff. They can sell their quota, or they can sell their right to fish. So it becomes a commodity as opposed to a public resource. And where this has happened, it has always resulted in large companies buying out small-scale fisherfolk and the death or the demise of small-scale fisheries. So we've seen that. So I'm saying to you, leadership need to see, to vision what is happening around, to be able to communicate this, and to be able to, of course, have some adaptive management measures to deal with it. So leadership has a lot of stuff that they need to be aware of, so that fisherfolk livelihoods can be secured, but also so that fishers can move from where they are to where they want to be, without being impeded. So leadership is always needed to promote group success. So I've done substantially with the actual presentation. But as I said earlier, as I began the presentation, I also wanted to share some stuff about CNFO and its leadership, and how we look at both developing leaders that are here now and building or training the next set of leaders, so that there is continuity in leadership in fisherfolk organizations in the Caribbean, including in the VI, if the VI is interested in having an organization or a group that is able to secure fishers' livelihoods and to take them to a different place. So I wanted to say that part of the CNFO's focus is about succession planning. And succession planning is about building the next set of leaders in the fisheries sector. So this presentation that we did tonight is part of a set of presentations, training modules that we in the CNFO use in our Leadership Institute to build leadership. So this is just one. And the others are working with groups, where we delve into the whole idea of the process of, group working together to achieve a common goal or objective. And then the other module that we also present on, or we have in our leadership portfolio, is the development of group vision, mission, and goals. And this is a whole module by itself that looks at how a group goes about to identify and clearly articulate its vision, its mission, and its goals. And then we have a module that looks at advocacy, representation, negotiation, and conflict resolution. And I'm actually thinking that we're going to split this module because it's a bit heavy. But at the moment, there's one module that deals with all four processes. Understanding that time is always an issue, and these are training modules that are geared to be free, accessible to everyone, and be able to be presented in a short period of time so people don't have to take a lot of time from their work. Yes? So we have that advocacy, representation, negotiation, and conflict resolution. And then we have an entire module that deals with relationship management, because we understand that leadership must manage the relationships that the group have, both internal relationships and external relationships, key elements of leadership. And then we have the whole idea of communications and networking. Because if you have a public relations department in a company, leadership must guide that. Leadership must monitor it. Leadership must adapt that communication activity to satisfy group goals and objectives. So that is also one of the modules that we have. And then we have a module that deals with institutional identity and integrity, because every organization is unique, but it also needs to be an organization that other people are willing to work with because it has integrity. So in addition to having a clear identity, there must be some level of integrity. So we have a module that deals with that. And then we have the modules that deal with practical things like administration and operations. And finally, we have a module that deals with meetings, just how you conduct meetings, facilitate decision-making, looking at pre-meeting planning, meeting facilitation, and post-meeting activities. So these are, I wanted to share these with you because they're part of our leadership training. And tonight I've just shared with you the whole idea of leadership itself in terms of exploring leadership and effective leadership. But in doing that, I also wanted to let you know that this is part of CNFO's work plan, the whole idea of building leadership and succession planning. So I want to thank you. I want to hand over to Nadine. I've been extremely verbose tonight, but Nadine will help me out from now. Nadine?
Thank you, Mitch, for that wonderful presentation on leadership. We are now going to move into the section where we have discussion on leadership. And I will ask if you want us to continue recording or end the recording for discussion time. Brent?
It don't really matter to me.
Okay.
It doesn't really, yeah.
All right, let's keep it rolling and see if we have momentum from the last module and see if we are prepared to do some discussion on leadership. So any comments, questions, concerns?
Nadine, I have a question to the, oh, sorry, I saw Kelly on mute. Go ahead.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. I was going to say I registered everything. I didn't have any questions, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks, Kelly. And I was just going to ask, well, put this question to the group. So whether you feel like you have been leading any process or being led, like, I was just curious to know, like, what have you been learning about leadership as you are currently working towards organizing Virgin Island Fisherfolk? So this could be from the perspective of feeling like, you know, you are playing a leadership role, or maybe you feel like you are a member, or, you know, who is being led. So I just wanted to know if anybody had any kind of reaction to that, how they have been feeling about leadership, whether they think it's difficult, it's easy, or just, you know, what they've been learning from that process so far.
Okay, for me, Mel, good night, again. For the leadership session, right, it shows, like Mitch was saying, you know, everybody could be a leader, but ain't everybody could still be a leader. And leadership comes with a great responsibility. Thus, with that responsibility and coinciding with every other member of Fisherfolk, so the whole community and the whole in itself is good, but at the end of it, you need structure, Mitch, correct? And I learning that so much because it's been pondering in my mind, you know, with all of this. You need structure, one of the greatest thing is commitment. I'm not gonna keep it too long, I'm just gonna get to it, right? One of the greatest thing is commitment. We started something and we just have to keep the momentum and be more cognizant of what is taking place pertaining to us enhancing and getting ourselves established, right? Because a few of the key points that Mitch touched base on made me really appreciate this session because it come down to like, you see like succession, when you said succession meaning that's for generations down the road. So we are just setting a platform, if you may. We're setting a platform because as time go by, things change. We all know, right? So these sessions have been very informative from start to now. I mean, I had a little ailment on one session. I missed some of it, but I know Nadine will fill me in. But it is very valuable in a sense that knowing now that we are making a move forward, we can now organize ourselves to have meetings, and the meetings that we have now can structure around these lessons from these workshops to enable us to move more expediently, right? So for me, in itself, it is valued. This information is valued highly because it gives me, it opens another door and the approach to establishing the Fisherfolk in the BVI. So I thank you guys again for the 5 minutes of talking there. I'll let the other guys speak. And please, guys, speak because I keep telling you guys, this is for us. So this is a platform for that. And remember, it's for each island. We have Anigada present right now, along with us. I was trying to get Franklin from Just Van Dyke, and we'll fill in Virgin-Gada. But we need to say, we can't just sit on the forum that is for us and just don't say anything. You know, we need to, like, if it meant anything, if we could add anything, you know, please say. And I'll end it.
So, I saw Brent wanted to say something, but at the same time when Ken started. Brent, you can have the floor now. Go ahead.
Yeah. The information tonight was very useful, but for me, being the leader of Patola and United is very hard. It's like you're forcing people to come to our well and they may want to drink no water. Until like, say, 20 years ago, right now is the easiest it ever been to hold a meeting. You don't have to drive nowhere. It doesn't have to be home in your house, you log on, and the meeting there. So for me, I think it's, and like I have been forcing them, it really hard for me. Because sometimes you call them, yeah, I'll be there, I'll log on. Nobody logging on. So you really got me vexed.
So if there's anybody else, we'd love to hear from you. I would also love to hear from any one of you as well concerning the whole idea of leadership in terms of motivating and inspiring, because sometimes that has to be a deliberate activity and not an activity that you leave to chance. Yes. Because that is how you get people involved. So what are your thoughts on that in the context of the VVI? Yes, your role as leaders in terms of inspiring, motivating. Remember, leadership is about influence. Yes. So how do you think about that, and how can you operate like that?
I would like to say something pertaining to that. As you were talking about the leadership and the roles of it, first, I think every or setup or committee that's formed, like in Virgin Gorda, Anegada, Jots Van Dyke, we all as individuals on our island needs to make awareness of what we are and what we're doing. Once we could be able to do so on our island, we could then collectively come together and be able to promote the idea and the cause that we're doing and what we're pushing. For example, I know the other day I went over to Jots Van Dyke to help some young guys be able to sell some of their kunks between Tortola and Jots Van Dyke. And I was able to call Brent, and in the combination of working together and whatnot and discussing the situation, he was able to assist with, spreading the word on Jots Van Dyke for us to be able to get a lot of our kunks sold. So again, I think leadership is definitely a priority for everyone, no matter the position that we play, because it all starts from a small scale for us to then grow the momentum to where we're trying to get. So working together, it makes a big difference, because if we were to just be on our own that day, we would have still at least had a cooler left of conch. So working together is a powerful thing, for sure. But we always gotta put that leadership bone in us forward to make things happen. Even some of the things that I did learn during this training process, I myself would put it towards my business as well. So my personal business. So I'm definitely appreciative for being able to be a part of it. So once again, I would say to you and everybody that was organizing and setting it up, thank you for the opportunity to basically empower everybody that's in this meeting now to better ourselves and our fishing folk, right? And that's all I got to say for tonight.
Thanks, Kelly. Is there anyone else? We'd really love to hear from the others as well. Is there any comment, a recommendation, any criticism? We take everything. We're good. No worries whatsoever.
Could I ask? I mean, Brent was speaking previously, I guess sharing his experience in terms of saying, how difficult it is to kind of get people to, maybe the word I might use is, to be motivated and kind of follow through and do things. So, I mean, I don't know if you have any, not advice, or maybe kind of just from your experience, that you could probably share with him or anyone else who might have been in a kind of leadership position before, in any context, who might have experienced something similar. I mean, like what might be a good, next step in terms of helping to motivate and influence the group a bit more?
So, Melanie, you wanted me to share some stuff, or it was mostly the group? Because
well, I was asking if you or anyone else. I mean, I know you have a wealth of experience from your own personal experience as well as through the CNFO network. So I just, if you had any words of wisdom, I guess, to kind of share, or anyone.
I don't know about the wisdom part, but we have seen some practical things work in terms of getting Fisherfolk moving on an issue. But generally, the movement happens because there's something you want to move from. And that is why we stress the importance of purpose, goals, and objectives. So, but I'll explain to you what happens. So so in my early years of involvement in Fisherfolk organization or organizing, we had issues in Antigua and Barbuda. And in order to get Fisherfolk motivated enough to support the leadership in moving to address those issues, we decided to go on a campaign to not only speak to the fisher themselves, but speak to their wife and children. Because where you live have a big impact on you. And when the children identified with the issues, some of the children got agitated. But more importantly, when the wives identified with the issues and understood the threat to their income from their husband, then action came about. So sometimes it's not just the person, the fisher himself. You have to also motivate and inspire those who are directly impacted by the fisher's activity. The wives, the children, the neighbors, the people who get fish from them for free, who they depend on, the people who depend on them for decent fish meal. Yeah? No, yes. So sometimes you have to think outside of just the fisher themselves. To impact the fisher, I'm talking, you know. Because remember, you don't really have to know the king. You just have to know the king's friend. Yeah? So that is something that I wanted to share with you as well. When you think of advocacy, when you think of inspiring, motivating, then the way to do it is not only directly, but through those entities who can have much more influence than you can, but who may be more willing to listen to you. So I wanted to share that, Melanie.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, I think I've actually like worked on projects too where we've had to also use that approach in terms of reaching out to the families, fishing families, so outside of the direct fisher, to get, you know, some interest or engagement kind of going on the projects. So yeah, I feel like that could be useful. Like, Brent, I don't know if you think that that's something that could be applicable in the Virgin Island context as a way of getting people more interested and motivated.
It's a good way, you know, Mel, because from my past experience being a part of government is that for fisheries, I used to actually go to the schools and do like little demonstration, do their presentations. So that thing with campaigning just turn on a light bulb. I said, look how everybody campaigning now for election. We need to campaign to show people what we're standing for. But we could do it on both fronts, not just don't be isolated to one approach. So it's a good idea. And it can work if we work together and we get it done. It's a good idea.
Okay. And I just wanted to mention, so I think it was Brent as well who had mentioned in a previous meeting, and this might have had to do with the fees or paying monies, I think, towards the registration of the organization. But basically it was something along the lines of, you know, the feedback was, you know, I guess the Fisherfolk wanted to see things happening before they felt like they wanted to kind of invest in the group. And so I guess to Mitch and others, you know, the question is that kind of maybe a natural process as well? Like, you know, you might find one or two or three people kind of carrying the burden for you know, the initial part, maybe the early part, until things really start materializing and coming together, and then you kind of get more interest and people kind of feeling more motivated to be a part of something that's already started.
So that is almost always the process, Melanie. I mean, that is why I say you work with who is there now. Almost always the process where there are a few who are inspired, motivated, and who decide to lead the process. Yes, because leadership is about taking a specific, definitive interest in influencing people to come with you to go to another place. Yes. What happens though is if there's a crisis that is urgent, then you have immediate involvement of everybody. But if it's not an urgent crisis, and but there are many different factors that need to be addressed, you must have a core set of people who are determined that, hey, our livelihoods depend on this, our next generation livelihoods depend on this. We are going to take some interest and lead this process. So, I mean, that's just the reality and experience.
Okay.
Incidentally, that's why I'm with the CNFO. I mean, I fish for a living, and there was significant interest that impacted my livelihood and my ability to feed my children. And therefore, I said I don't intend for anybody else to represent me when they don't know how I feel about my livelihood and my children. So I decided I'm going to lead the process to defend my livelihood. That's why I'm here now, being a horse driven by the CNFO.
Well, Mitch, I could relate to him because being my knowledge from my experiences, it showed that I don't want the fisheries in the BVI to get mistreated. And one of the problems will lie with the fishermen not organizing themselves. They have one complaints. One complaints don't work. A united front complaint works, you know? So I when I got opportunity to get this training first and what's not get us going, I jump out to help us to enhance ourselves. So like you said, I somewhat like you. I care about what I do. Fishing is me. I mean, ever since I know myself is fishing. So I fully concur, you know. So don't think that some of we doing this for fame. We doing it because we care about it. And we don't want to see it collapse because we want our future to see it, you know. But it just need to be sustainably done and unitedly done, you know, in a proper network, and things could work out properly. So yeah, sorry.
All right, and anybody else? I mean, certainly we enjoy being of service to you. But is there any other comment, any other note, anything that we need to pay attention to, or you'd like to share with us, or you'd like help with?
Okay, Mitch, I will intervene here and bring this recording to an end at this
Oh,
moment.
Nadine, wait, before you do that, I just wanted to just say a few quick things in terms of next steps. I don't know
No,
if you
oh, you want
to
it on the
respond.
recording? Okay, go ahead.
Well, yeah. All right. So, well, I mean, I know Nadine will probably do this again, but thanks to all of you all for, you know, making the time to attend these sessions. We really appreciate it. You know, some of you were able to make it to all 4 or 3 or 2 or even just one. We, you know, we appreciate that you made the time, and we really hope that it was of value to you. I just want to note as well that CNFO normally does these trainings probably over 24 hours of contact time. So it might, you know, what we did, what CNFO would have done would have been a much shorter version of a much more longer and in-depth type of training that they do. So with that said, I mean, we do have some additional resources that I could share with you all in the WhatsApp group. But basically it's some, you know, basically some toolkits or books rather, one that looks at leading fisherfolk. So it, you know, it speaks a little more on, you know, what are some of the qualities of a leader, what is leadership. So some of the things that Mitch would have touched on as well. But obviously you have a book that goes into a little bit more depth. So I will share the link for that particular book where you could access and download that. As well as CANARI has a toolkit that is on civil society organizations, strengthening civil society organizations. And we consider Fisherfolk organizations a type of civil society organization, right? They fall under that umbrella. So I can share that book as well. And that, you know, again, gives, you know, more ideas in terms of financial planning, mission and vision and things like that. So I will share the links to those two books in the WhatsApp group, so you could just access it and download it to your computer or your phone or wherever. As well, I just want to remind everyone that Mitch and Nadine and Adrian, right, the CNFO has graciously volunteered, you know, to support you all with preparing your, you know, well, you know, talking through and coming up with your mission and your vision. And I think, you know, any other areas that you might want to kind of maybe bounce ideas off of them. And so I think please make use of that, that offer. Mitch and Nadine, I think maybe the best way to get access to you all would be by email. Should I share your email address with the group?
Oh, certainly. I mean, and CNFO has an email as well.
Okay. So what I'll do as well is I will share the CNFO's email address in the WhatsApp chat, and you could feel free to message Mitch and Nadine, you know, if you feel you want to get their support, maybe they would be willing to do us, you know, maybe a little hour session to help you talk through your mission and your vision and that kind of thing. So they have volunteered their time to do that. And lastly, just in terms of next steps, so remember, all of this is happening. The support that CANARI and CNFO as well are providing is all kind of captured under a project, right? So that same capacity building in fisheries evidence networks and management in the Virgin Islands project, which I'll remind you ends at the end of September. So we do have a few more activities that we want to kind of engage the fisherfolk in. So we're still kind of ironing things out and trying to get more specifics about these activities. But just in general, I'll share with you that, and Adrian would have probably mentioned this to you a few months ago as well, but we want to help facilitate a pair exchange to another Caribbean island. So we have to confirm what the island is, as well as confirm how many fisherfolk representatives from the Virgin Islands will be able to accommodate on that trip. So that would be an opportunity to go to another island, you know, preferably one that has a well-organized fisherfolk. So you could see how, you know, fisherfolk are organized, how they are able to maybe participate in things like a fisheries advisory committee. And we'd also like to select an island where you could get to see other kind of fishery sustainability kind of initiatives. So maybe a country that's looking at using fish silage or maybe using climate smart gear and that kind of thing. So you get, some exposure to that if it's an area of interest. And as well, we would like to support maybe a demonstration project. So I'm calling it demonstration because it would, again, be something similar to what I described with the peer exchange, but, maybe where we get the opportunity to bring someone into the Virgin Islands who can maybe share more about smart gear and how it is used, and, maybe kind of get some feel for how interested, Fisherfolk are in that kind of thing. So still thinking it through. So excuse me if I'm kind of sounding a little vague there, but we'll try to share some more specifics as well. We would want to do some additional online training. Well, not training, but probably more sharing rather than training. But on we talk about the ecosystem approach to fisheries, which again is really just looking at fisheries sustainability, and a big aspect of that is stewardship, the role that fishers and fisherfolk play in caring for the ecosystems that they depend on as fishers. So we want to just maybe incorporate some more online sessions to share with you on that. That would include CNFO has a code of conduct for fisherfolk that they developed probably within the last 2 years or so. And it provides, some good guidance for fisherfolk in, their role as stewards. I don't know if I'm explaining that well. I'm sure Nadine or Mitch could do a better job, but basically there's a code of conduct, and we would like to be able to just kind of share with the Virgin Island fisherfolk on that as well. So those are the 3 things that we're working on, but we would just like to, CANARI and CNFO, we want to just speak to the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, that they are a partner on the project. And we want to speak as well with the CFAS, which is the Center for Environment, Fisheries, and Aquaculture Science. So those of you who would have met Peter back in September last year, he's from CFAS. So we want to talk with them because they are the lead implementers on the project. So as soon as we understand those specifics a bit more, I'll probably just reach out to you in the WhatsApp chat to maybe have another quick 30-minute kind of briefing to let you know, okay, this is what's happening. This is the dates that we are proposing that we could do these activities, and see if that kind of works for everyone. So I think that's it from me. And of course, feel free to ask me any questions in the WhatsApp chat. I'm available there to respond. Okay, Nadine. Now I'm finished.
Thank you, Melanie. Melanie, can you give the instructions as you see it on your screen to complete the questionnaire? How do you move to the next question?
Yes. Okay. So just to wrap up the whole training, the 4 training sessions that we've done, we want to just do a final evaluation. So those of you who would have recalled at the beginning of the first session, we asked you some questions on how knowledgeable you felt you were on certain topics. We are basically asking those questions again, and I think 2 or 3 additional ones. So you'll see right now, you should see up on your screen something that says questionnaire module 1, Virgin Islands, copy. If you just use the scroll bar to the right of that box that you're seeing, you will see 8 questions that you'll be able to respond to by clicking a response. Some are multiple choice and some are open short answer questions. Nadine, how do you answer the short answer ones?
You can answer.
Where can you find that? I'm not seeing it.
Well, I'm seeing a box up on my screen. Nadine, how do they access it? Is everyone seeing the questionnaire on the screen? Can you
We
not
answer
see
the
it?
first.
Oh, right.
6.
Oh, you answered. Okay,
I
you
only got
answered.
to answer one. I only got to answer one.
Right, you just have to scroll down. So can you not see in the box on
Nah,
your screen anymore?
nah. No, I'm not.
Nadine, I don't know how to bring back up the poll. Maybe click on polls. Ken, at the bottom of your screen, where you see in participants, polls, chat, are you able to click on polls? Nadine, do you know how they could pull back up the questionnaire if it came off for them?
I am thinking, and I don't want to, but I can
Close
end
it
this.
off, yeah.
One person completed, I think, or did most, did 6 questions of the 8, and then that one person did only number 1. So if I end, the person that completed, you will have to do it over for us, I think, if it's not recorded. Do you want me
Well,
to?
let me just ask. Christina, are you seeing the questionnaire? Are you able to respond? We actually only have 3.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Just Brent, Ken, and Christina. Everybody else is
last, yeah.
Well, I like to say Nadine and Mel and Mitch, Adrian, everybody. I must say that is a lot of information, but based on how Mitch presented it step by step, it made it very useful. And I'd like to say thank you for extending the opportunities that you are extending to us. So I thank you guys very much. And I apologize for everybody that just left, you know. So, here it is. I seen it now.
right, because I think, yeah, Nadine brought it back up. The other thing, Nadine, I was thinking is maybe I could share it in a WhatsApp group. I don't know if that's possible.
There is a poll that you can create, like, you do settings, you can actually create a poll where they can just do clicking and don't have to do much.
In WhatsApp?
Yes.
Okay. I may have to try that because I'll have to try and capture the people who left as well, or who attended other sessions, but not this one.
All right. So thank you, Brent, Ken, Glenise. Glenise has on her mic.
Are you also
Thank you.
doing the survey? We could just hold on a minute if people are still filling it out. Let's use the gray scroll bar on the right to move up and down to see the questions, 8 questions. Sorry?